Welcome to this video as we continue building a to-do planner with Django. In the previous part of this series, we customized the user model of our application. We explain why and also look at two common ways by which we can customize a user model in Django. Because it is recommended to set your custom user model before your initial migration, and in our first videos we actually did the initial migration before customizing our user model in the previous video. So check the previous video to look at the fix. In part 6 of this series, we will look at testing our Django models. Do we really need to test our Django model? What type of testing is often used to test a Django model? How deep should we go when testing a Django model? All these questions will be answered in this series. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment to support the content. Code with Django. Testing in software development refers to the systematic process of evaluating a software application to identify defects, ensure it meets specified requirements, and also verify that it performs as expected. This gives us the confidence to ship code to production without fear of breaking the existing system. Now you might be wondering, should I test my Django model? From the definition of testing, it is clear that verifying how your software application behaves is essential, and Django models are no exceptions. Since Django models represent the structure of your database table, and data is one of the most valuable assets of any organization, ensuring that this model works correctly is just as important as testing any other part of your application. This is a question I've had since I first started working with Django. How deep should I test my model? The depth of your test should depend on the nature of the data you are handling. If the data is fragile or sensitive where mistakes in data types, constraint, or validation could lead to serious problems, then your model test should be equally deep. This is the difference between deep testing and shallow testing for a Django model. The first one tests the creation of an instance of a model. The next one tests to make sure that data in the model instance is what it should be. The last one tests the model method. For deep testing, we test all the points that were discussed in the shallow testing. Added to that, we test the name of the model field. We test all attributes of the model field, for example, null, blank, default, and so on. We also test all constraints. We test that relationships are created correctly. Relationships like many-to-many relationship, one-to-one, and foreign key relationship. We also test any inherited abstract method if present. And lastly, we test model customs metadata. So in this series, we will be handling deep testing, all right, so that you have a sense of the shadow testing alongside the extra testing that will be done to make up the deep testing. In Django, we have two options: unit test, that is shipped with Django and uses the Python's built-in unit test package. We also have the second option, that is PyTest Django, that uses PyTest behind the hood, with a lot of abstraction that takes care of all the basic nuances of writing tests. For our model, we will be using PyTest Django alongside Faker to generate fake data and model backquery. It is a utility framework that will help us create objects automatically without having to care about data to fill up in the database. To install these packages is very easy. We are using UV. So here on our terminal, we will say UV add, and the first one will be PyTest Django. Second one will be Faker, and the last one will be model backquery. So we'll go ahead and press enter, and the magic is done. Good. So we have all our packages for testing installed. By default, when we create a new app, Django creates a test.py file. So we can see, if we look at the apps folder and take we take a look at any of these application, let's say with the user application, we can see here we have a file called test.py. So this is where normally Django recommends, or this is where Django assumes that we will be testing the entire application. It may be difficult to test an entire application in one test file. So best practice requires that we create a package called tests where we can have test files and folders. If you're using unit tests, all test files and folders should prepend tests so that the Django unit test package can detect them automatically during test discovery. With PyTest, we can set which Python files PyTest should detect in the pytest.ini file. So for the test structure, let's start with the first one, that is the core application. So here in the core application, if we take a look at the model.py, we can see we have basically two models here. The first one is the abstract model that is inherited by all our models, and we have the abstract des model that contains the description and a method for the description. So here, instead of having this file test, we will go ahead and delete this. Okay, and here we're gonna create a new folder called tests. In there, we're gonna have our init file, and here, because we will have so many tests, okay, we want to make sure that we have a folder here that says test models, okay, so that we distinguish it from other tests, maybe views and serializers, whatever. So here again, I will have my __init.py, and we are testing two things in this model. Based on this model, we are testing two things: the abstract model and this abstract dest model, or abstract description model. All right, so here I will have the first file will be test model.py, and the second file will be test_des model.py. all right, so this file, this is where we will test the abstract model, and this is where we will test the abstract description model. All right, so the next application will be the user application, and in here, same thing that we did with the core application. We will go ahead and delete this test.py because we don't need it. And here I will go ahead and create a folder called test. In there, I'm gonna create my init file, init. All right, so looking at the model here, we can see here that we have one custom manager and also one class model. Okay, so I'll be sticking with just one model throughout this application. So here I don't need to create a folder called test_model. So in the test folder, I can just create a file called test_model.py where I will be testing my user planner model. The next one will be the task model, and here we can see we have approximately, or we have exactly 1, 2, 3, 4 models. Okay, so again, I'll go ahead and delete this file, and I'm gonna create a new folder here called tests. In there, I'm gonna have my init, and of course, I'm gonna create a folder here called test model. In there, I'm gonna have my init. All right, so looking at this various model, I'm gonna have a test file for each of this model. So I'm gonna create the first one. I'm gonna say test task.py. Next one would be test_subtask.py. Next one would be test label.py. Next one would be test key results.py. All right, to save us some time, I just went ahead and did the last two. So if we take a look at the project, we can see we have here a test folder, and in there we have a test model folder, and in there we have the various test file that correspond to the different models that we have in the model folder. So we can see everything about the project model will be tested in the test_project file, and so on and so forth. So same thing with the link application. Here the link application has just one model, that is the link, and I think this will be the only model that will be used for this particular application. And so here we have the test file, and in here we don't need a folder test model, so we have just this file, and this is where we'll be testing the link model. So this is a structure of our testing. It's best practice to use the same database in production and testing. This is because testing aims at catching errors early in our development process. It's common for developers to try to achieve high speed during testing, so they are tempted to use SQLite or similar databases. Sure, you will achieve high speed, but the testing environment won't be the same as production environment, and we might face data integrity issues in production, which won't be caught by our test cases. Django by default creates a database for testing and destroys it after test, regardless if the test succeeds or fails. The database created will have test prepend to the name, so we can see here we have this name, and whatever this name would be, there will be test prepend to this name. All right, so Django does it by default. We can also change this name. We can give a default name, or we can give a custom name to our test database. And in order to do that, we need to have a test attribute here, or a test key here. And in here we'll do like this, and here we're gonna have name, uppercase, and here we can give the name of our database. We can say this is my database. Okay, so this way during testing, Django will use this name instead of appending test on this name here. But for our case here, we will stick to the default provided by Django. So here I'm just gonna go ahead and comment out this one. For our Django model, we will be using unit tests. So what is unit tests? Unit test is a test that tests the smallest unit of our code. This is a type of automated test that runs each time an update is done. Alright, it is time for us to start writing our tests. Because we will be testing deep, there will be a lot of repetition, especially at the level of testing the fields attributes. So we want to make sure we avoid that. And for that, we are going to come to the core application. In here, we're going to create a file called helpertest.py that will contain some common test command, or some common test codes. Okay, so the common code will be at the level of testing the instance of our model, and also testing the fields, the different fields of our model. So for that, we will go ahead and import. Let me import from typing. I'm gonna import any, and I'm gonna import model. Okay, so from django.db import model, and I'm gonna import from model bakery. I'm gonna import baker, and here we're gonna import our abstract model, because remember, our abstract model is inherited by all our models. So we're gonna say from apps.core.models import abstract model. Okay, so with that, we're gonna go ahead and start establishing our base model. So the first one will be class base model test. Okay, and here we are going to introduce a class attribute that will contain our model. So here it's gonna be of type model. For now, it's gonna be none. It's gonna be set once we start testing, and any instance attributes that will be provided will come to this particular class attribute. So it's going to be a dictionary, string will be the key will be a string, and anything for the value. So for now, it's going to be empty. All right, so the first important thing is that we want to make sure that we expose the instance of this model. Okay, so we can do that using fixture of PyTest. So we're gonna say PyTest. So let me just make sure I import PyTest here. Import PyTest, and here I'm gonna say PyTest dot fixture. So the default is the default scope of this fixture is function. So here we're gonna say instance. Okay, this instance will be exposed as a fixture. So this is gonna be a model. All right, and it's gonna return. We're gonna use now the model bakery to create an instance of this model while filling it up with data. All right, so we're gonna say baker.make serve model, and we're gonna pass in the serve instance quacks. Okay, if no instance attribute is passed here, the baker, okay, is going to use randomly generated values. All right, so we have that, and we can have some few tests just to make sure that the instance and the model are okay. So the first one we can test here is that we're gonna test that whatever will be set in this model, this class attribute model, is gonna be an instance of model. So we're gonna say is superclass, is subclass model. We're gonna test that, and here we're gonna say asset is subclass serve.model should be a subclass of model.model. Okay, so because this is testing only the model. The other test we can establish here is that this model should be an abstract model. Okay, this object should be, or no, this object should inherit an abstract model, because all our models inherit the abstract model. Okay, so we're gonna say test is subclass abstract model. So here we're gonna assert that is subclass serve.model should be a subclass of abstract model. And the last one would be we're gonna test has common attributes. So we have some common attributes for all our model, and these common attributes are in the abstract model. Okay, so we want to make sure that all these models are present. So of course, we want to make sure that this model is a subclass of the abstract model. Definitely it should have all those properties. Okay, so this might be a lot right now, but let's go ahead and do it so that we know how to do it. So here it's gonna take in the instance. Okay, remember the instance is a fixture. All right, so it's a fixture, so it's gonna be provided here, and here we can go ahead and test. We can say asset has attribute. So the instance should have attributes. Let's take a look at the various attribute that we need. Yeah, so here we need to make sure we have the public ID, the name, the created at, and the modified at. So we're gonna say this should have the name, and I'm just gonna go ahead and copy and paste this public ID, and we're gonna have, sorry, created at and modified at. All right, okay, so this is the basic test that we need for our instance. Then the rest will be in the specific models that we will be testing. All right, so the next one will be a base class to test the field, our models fields. Okay, so we're gonna call it base model field test, and here we will have a lot of class attribute to set before the testing. So the first one will be the model, and it's gonna be a type models.model, or it's gonna be none. Same thing that I have to do here. Okay, and here it's gonna be none by default. and we have the field name. Field name will be a string or none, equals to none. We have the field type. It's gonna be, the field type will be model.field. Okay, it will be of type model.field, and here it's gonna be model type of field or none. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy this, so have it like this. So we're gonna have other attributes that are common to, to all our model, like the null. The null will be bool, but by default is false. We have blank, which is also bool, by default false. We have default, that is any. Okay, it can be anything. So here we're gonna set it to the model field not provided. This will be fields not provided. We have unique, which is boolean. It's gonna be false, I think. We have the db index, which is boolean. It's gonna be false. We have the auto now. Auto now, of course, is used only for date fields, but we'll see how to handle that. So this is false by default, and we have the auto now at, and boolean, this will be false by default. We have primary key, which will be boolean, and it's gonna be false by default. And we have the maximum length, which is an integer. It's gonna be, I think it's gonna be none by default, right? So yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and paste this. It's gonna be integer or none. Okay. All right, so these are the various fields these are the common fields, basically common fields. And once we have that, we can go ahead and start testing the different fields. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is that we want to go ahead and have a property here that will return the field. So we're gonna say field, and here we say this will return serve.model, the model that was set above here. And we're gonna have the field, we're gonna try to get the field from the field name. Okay, so we're gonna say dot meta dot oh my god, dot underscore meta dot get field from the field name. Okay, so this is very important. So I'm just gonna demonstrate it a little bit here. So here we're gonna go ahead and say make def shell plus. This is a command that is found in my make file. Okay, so let's say I have the user planner, right? Or let's say I have the project. This is a project model, and let's say I want to get a field. So I can say project dot underscore meta dot get field, and let's say I want to get the field, let's say name. Okay, so this will return this particular object, and from there I can go ahead and test many things. Okay, so it's the same thing we are doing here. Okay, so once we have that, it's going to return. So we can start testing a few things. So let's say the first one, we want to test the field type. Okay, so we're going to asset is instance. So the serve.field, okay, the serve.field, that is this, for example, should be an instance of the field that was passed in here. Okay, the field type that was passed in here. All right, so here it's gonna be serve.field type. Okay, so for now I will just stop here, and we're gonna go ahead and integrate and run the test and see how it works before we add other properties or we add other tests. Okay, so let's start with the user model or the user application and see how the test behaves. So yeah, I'm gonna move to my user application, and in the test we have, it is empty, so I'll be testing this guy here. All right, so first thing first, I'll go ahead and import PyTest. And next, I'm going to import from apps.core.helperTest. I'm going to import the base model test. And I'm going to also import from apps.user.model. I'm going to import user planner model. All right, so my first test will be called test model user planner. And here it's going to inherit the base model test that we established already from the helper test file. And here we're going to set the model. The model will be user planner. So we can see here we just make sure that we inherit, all right, we inherit this class and we set this model property, and this test will run automatically. Okay, so we want to override something here. We want to override this one because we see that the user planner has more fields. Okay, so we're gonna inherit we're gonna go ahead and override this. Okay, or extend it. All right, so right here we're gonna say this, and I think this takes in the it takes in, oh my god, I have a lot of things open here, so let me close some of these, please. Close all, basically. Yeah, I'm gonna save this. Okay, so I have this should be open and this should be open. Okay, so this takes in the instance, which is a fixture, so we're gonna say instance. And yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and call this call what we had already from the base class using super test. Okay, so I'm just gonna call the super and pass in the instance. I don't think I should pass in the instance because of course it is a fixture. Okay, so let me see. I'll test it with this, then I'm gonna remove the instance later on. So after we have that, we can go ahead and asset more fields as attribute. So the instance should have attributes. So let's take a look at the various attributes that this class should have. If we go to this, we open the model, and here we can see we have the username, first name, and last name. So let's test just those: username, first name, and last name. Username, first name, and last name. All right. So our Django needs to have access to the database. Okay, so PyTest Django does that with a fixture called pytest.mark.django Django_db. Okay, so with this decorator, we give access to the database. Okay, to this particular test. So the test will be dealing with the database. All right. Okay. So with that, let's see how we can run this. But before we run this, we need to do a few configuration. Okay. So in the working directory, let's make sure I'm in the working directory. I'm going to create a file called pytest.ini. Okay, so this is where we're going to have some configuration for our PyTest. And here we're going to have, first we want to make sure that we set the Django setting model. So we're going to say Django settings module, which is going to be equals to, we can see them, we are using the dev environment. So we're going to say config.settings.dev. So the next one will be to specify the files that we want to consider as test files. So we're going to say python.files. We want to identify anything that has to do with test.py, identify anything that has to do with, that starts with test, okay, and identify anything that ends with test. So we're gonna do like that. Okay, so this is what we have. All right, so with that, let's see how we can run our test. So we're gonna go ahead and run this test now. So I'm gonna go out of this, and I'm gonna do just a py test. Okay, so let's finger cross. Okay, so we can see that you can register custom mark to avoid this warning. Okay, so I think I have some issues with the name here. It should be Django underscore DB, not Jang. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna just fix it real quick. Okay, and go ahead and run it again. Alright, so after checking a few things, I realized that yeah, since we're using an external library for the phone number, somehow this package, the package, how they call it, model bakery, okay, the model bakery does not really support it. Okay, this model bakery. So we can see here it creates an instance while giving in default values. Okay, so it doesn't really it doesn't support that external library that we use for the phone number. So to fix that, we are going to provide some default values, okay, for that phone number, and that is why we have this instance quacks. Okay, the instance quack is for us to pass in some default value if we want to, or we want to allow our baker.make to give in to create some default values for us. Okay, so here we're gonna go ahead in our test model, and in here we're gonna go ahead and pass in some default value for the phone number. And here I'm gonna use in the codes, country code of my country, Cameroon, so 237, and I'm gonna pass in some this is not a valid number. Okay, this is just something for testing, so we're gonna say okay, so something like that. Okay, all right. So also I have some issues here at the pytest.ini. So I was checking the code and I saw that I made a mistake with this naming here, so this should be files. Okay, all right, so with that out of the way, and also just to make sure that we don't have all these warnings, because we can see we have these warnings and it makes our terminal really, yeah, nasty. So we want to make sure we remove that particular warning. So we can do that with the pytest.ini, and here we can say add ops, and we're gonna use the -p north column warning. Okay, this should remove the warning. So let's go again and run it. All right, so we have 3 tests passing. So if we go ahead and run it with verbose, so we can see we have the test has common attribute is running, test is subclass running, and test is subclass abstract model running successfully. Good. So let's go ahead and add more tests. To add more tests, we will move to the hyper test. Okay, so here in this base model field test that helps or give us the opportunity to test the various fields, we'll go ahead and add more tests here. So the next one will be to test the null is null. Okay, the null property, and we're gonna just say assets and serve dot field null equals to serve dot null. Okay, all right. So before we go ahead and do this, I just want to show you how we can test this, because the first one we did was to test this with the help of the base model. So let me show you how we can test with the help of the base model field test. Then we go ahead and add more tests here. So let's go back to the user model, and in here, let's say we want to test a field. let's say we want to test the username field. Okay, we can see the username field has the DB index set to true, the unique set to true, and a maximum length of 50. Okay, so if we go back to our test model, sorry, yeah. So here we're gonna say class, let's say test field user planner username. Okay, and yeah, it's gonna inherit the base. So let me go ahead and import it first. So yeah, it's gonna import base model field test, and yeah, we're gonna inherit it. So we're gonna set the model. The model will be user planner, and the field name is username. The field type is models.char field. So I don't have models import yet, so let me go ahead and import it. So from django.db import models, and here the field will be model char field, and unique is true, right? DB index is true, and the maximum length is equals to 255. All right, so once we have this, okay, now what will happen is that this particular class will go ahead and run these methods. So we can see here the only thing that it tests right now, it tests to make sure that the field type is okay, and it makes sure to test the null. Okay, so with that we can go ahead and just test it, and we're going to add more tests. So let me just go ahead and run all the tests. So we can see everything passed, so we have everything okay. So let me go ahead and test it, because right now we can see, if we take a look at what we have here, we are not testing the unique, we are not testing the DB index, we are not testing the maximum length. Okay, so we are going to add more tests and make sure we cover all of this. All right, so let's go back to the hyper test, and here the next one is gonna be, we're gonna test the unique, is unique, and we're gonna asset serve.field unique equals to serve unique. Okay, so we can run the test each time we have that to make sure that everything passes. And the next one will be test is indexed. So it's gonna asset serve.field db index equals to serve db index. Okay, so with that we can run the test again. Let me just remove these variables. Okay, the next one will be test is blank. So let me just go ahead and copy this, because I'm gonna repeat myself a lot. So here it's gonna be blank, and here blank. Okay, the next one will be test default value. If we give any default value, then we want to test it. So here we're gonna say default equals to serve.default, and the next one would be test is primary key. So the test is primary key is gonna say primary key equals to serve.primary key. So the next one will be test has max length. So we're gonna do this, max length equals to max length. Okay, so I can see that everything is okay, and we have covered everything from this test. We are testing the testing the field type, we are testing the unique, we are testing the DB index, and we are testing the maximum length. Okay, so if I go ahead and run this test now, so we can see that everything, okay, so we have some issues here, and it says the maximum length is not the same as the maximum length. So if we go to the model, we can see here that the maximum length of the username is instead 50. So we can see how it fails, right? So here we have to make sure that the maximum length is 50 instead of 255. So if we fix that and run our test again, so we can see everything passes. All right, so the next things we want to add is the auto now and the auto now at, but those two properties are common only for date times, okay, for dates, date fields. Okay, so we want to make sure that we when we identify that a particular model or a particular field is a date field, then we go ahead and run it. If not, then we can skip it. Okay, then we can skip it. So let's see how we can do that. So first thing first, I will move right at the top here, and I'm going to define a constant. Let me call it datetime fields, and here I'm going to identify the datetime fields. So we're going to say models dot datetime field. That's the first one. We have model dot date field, and we have the model dot time field. So these are the different date fields that we want to run the at now and the at now, the auto now and the auto now at. Okay, so with that out of the way, we can go back to our the different tests that we were establishing, and here we can say def test auto now. Okay, and first we're gonna check to make sure that the field that was given is part of the default, is part of the constant that we just defined above there. So we're gonna say if serve dot field, okay, we get the class. Okay, if the class is not in datetime default datetime field, okay, so if it is not there, then we go ahead and skip the test. So with PyTest, we can do it with pytest.skip, and here we can give some message. So we can just do something like this and say serve.model underscore name, and maybe something like that, serve.field name is not a date or time model type. Okay, so if it is not of that type, then we go ahead and skip it. Else we go ahead and asset it and say serve.field.auto now equals to serve.auto now. So we're going to do the same thing for the auto now at. So I'm just going to copy this and down here paste it, and here it's going to be auto now at, and so yeah, same thing, and yeah, it's going to change with at, and yeah, at. Okay, perfect. So I'm just go ahead and run it to make sure that everything is working as expected. So we can see here we have two skips because the username is not a date or time field. Okay, so for time's sake, I went ahead and did everything. So I tested all the different fields for our user planner, and these are the various changes that I made. So first thing first, I imported Faker, initialize it here, and went ahead and generated our phone number rather than hard coding it here. And the next thing is that I made sure I import our phone number, okay, and import the every other thing that I need to import, that is the model and so on. And down here we can see we established the username in the previous section. So here, this is for the first name. We can see the first name has a maximum length of 255. The last name has null, blank, and maximum length of 255. Phone number has unique and region set to none. Region is set to none and unique to true. Because we are not testing region in the base class because it is not common to all the different fields. That's why we have it here. Okay, so here we are testing the region to make sure that the region is what it's supposed to be. And somehow this phone number field, this external library does not have the maximum length property, so that's why I had to hard code it here. Okay, so I could still do it like this, and I say pytest.skip, and I say phone number field has no maximum length attributes. Okay, this can still work. Okay, so here we are testing the email. The email have DB index and unique set to true and a maximum length of 255. Date of birth, so date of birth has no property. And country we can see it here, and profession we can see it here. Is active and is staff. Okay, so all of these correspond to the model that we have in our user planner class. So let's go ahead and run the test. Okay, so we can see everything run as expected. Before I forget, if we go back to our test, we can see here that we created a new class just to set the model to user planner, because if we don't do that, we'll need to set user planner in all the different classes. Okay, so here I have to do the same thing, rather than, so here I'm going to remove this model because the user planner, because it inherits the base user planner field test that already set our model. Okay, so all of these different classes down here inherit from this base user planner field test that sets the model already. All right, so coming back to our test model user planner, so I went ahead and added the remaining attributes of our user planner model. So we ended with the last name, and here I added this phone number, email, date of birth, country, profession, is active, is staff, the username field, the required field, and the full names. So these are all attributes of this class, so we can see them here. Okay, and we have the full name, which is a property. Okay, so we have a few tests that we can do here as well. So we can test the username field. Okay, so this username field here, we can see it here, to make sure that the username field is set to the username. So yeah, we're gonna do it like this. It's gonna take in the instance, which is a fixture, and we're gonna say asset instance username field equals to username. Okay, so once I have that, just go ahead and run a test to make sure everything is fine. Okay, so we can check. So database access not allowed, use Django to mark blah blah blah. Okay, so here we need to have access to this okay, we need to have access to the database just like we did here. But of course, this is a lot of work, right? This is a lot of work. For all the different functions we'll be using that require database, we need to put this marker, which is not effective, right? So to fix this, we are going to use the conf test. Okay, I don't know how to call that. The conf test configuration of PyTest. So for that, we'll go to the working directory, and we're gonna create a file called conf test, okay, .py, and in there we are going to set a fixture that will be inherited by all our functions, or that will be called by all our functions. Okay, so here we're gonna say import pytest, and here we're gonna say pytest dot fixture, and we're gonna use the auto use true. So what this auto use true does is that it's gonna be used, okay, by all the different scope, because the default scope here is not by all the different scope. Okay, it's gonna be used by that scope. All right, so we don't need to mention it. Okay, For example, this fixture by default is the scope of this fixture by default is function. So once we use the auto use, it means that what we don't need to pass it as an argument, just like we did here. We don't need to pass it as an argument. It's gonna be used. It's gonna be called. Okay. So once we have that, we go ahead and say, let me just say give db access. Okay, let me call it, and we have the db fixture already that comes with the package that we're using, the PyTest Django. Okay, that give access to the database. So it's gonna, this function or this fixture will use this other fixture and it's gonna make it auto use. All right, so yeah, I'm just gonna say pass. All right, so once I have that, I can go to my test. I don't need this anymore, so I can go ahead and comment out this, and this automatically will also use the fixture, okay, because it will be called by all our functions. So if we go ahead and run it again, so we can see everything work as expected. All right, so the next test would be, we're gonna test the required field. Okay, so we're gonna asset instance required field uppercase. So we can see the required field is a list of some fields, so we can see them here. All right, so we have the email, first name, and date of birth. So we're gonna do the same thing. Here we're gonna say email, first name, date of birth. Okay, so let me fix that. Okay, so with that, we go ahead and run it, make sure it works. Okay, so the next test will be to make sure that the name is set to none. Remember, if we come back to our model, we can see here that though our user planner inherits from the abstract model that defines name, the name field, you can see it here, it defines the name field, but our user planner model does not have the name field, because here we can see we set it to none. Okay, so once we set it to none, Django will not create a field in the database for this particular name. So we want to make sure this is set to none. Okay, so we can do that by going back to our test, and where is the test? Okay, a lot of things. So here we can say test name set to none. So we're gonna say asset instance name is none. Okay, all right, so we go ahead and test it again. Okay, perfect. We have two more things to test at the level of the user planner. At the level of the instance, we can see here we have two methods. We have this method here, full names, and we have this Donda string methods. Okay, so let's go ahead and test that. We will start with the full names. So we're gonna say test full names, and it's gonna take in instance. And here we're gonna asset, make sure that the value that is returned is actually something like this. So we can see here we have we're just gonna copy it. Okay, if we were doing test driven development, then we will first do the test before we we go ahead and code the solution. All right, so I'm just gonna copy that and paste it here and change all the serve to instance. Okay, so we make sure that we asset instance full name equals to this. Okay, all right, so let me go ahead and run it and see, make sure everything is working as expected. Okay, so the next one will be to test the Donda string. So I'm gonna say test str method. So yeah, we're gonna asset to make sure that the string of the instance equals to, we can see here we have just this. So I'm just gonna go ahead and copy this, paste it here, and change all the serve to instance. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and run the test again. Alright, so the last thing we're going to do for the user planner is to test the manager. So we can see here the user planner, okay, has a manager that is set at the level of the objects. So let's see how we can test that. Alright, so I'm just gonna make sure here we are testing test model instance, okay, just to be sure that we know what we're doing. And here we are testing test model fields, okay, and just in between here, yeah, in between, I'm going to say test model manager. All right, so yeah, we're gonna have a class here called test model manager, okay, or we can call it test user planner manager, and it's gonna inherit the base model test because we actually need the instance of that model in order to test the manager. So we're gonna have this. So we're gonna set in the model. The model will be equals to user planner. Okay, so the first thing I want to test is to make sure that the object actually have the manager. So we can see here, we want to make sure the object here is assigned to or the user manager, the instance of the user manager is assigned to the object. Okay, so that's how deep we can go. Okay, so we're gonna say test object, and here we're gonna say assets is instance serve.model.objects is the same as the user manager. So I'm gonna go ahead and import the user manager here, and it should be an instance of the user manager. Okay, so each time I'm gonna do that, I will run the test to make sure everything works as expected. So we can see we have an error here, and it says phone number is not supported by Baker. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing. So remember we had this issue already, so I'm gonna just go ahead and do this to make sure that our phone number is created, okay, because the baker.make doesn't support this particular extension or this particular external library. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to test the create super user. Okay, so because our manager has a creates user and it creates super user, okay, and we can see here the create super user uses the create user. So we can say this is gonna be an integrated testing, okay, because we are testing just the create super user and we are indirectly testing this. Of course, when you're doing unit testing, you have to make sure that you mock out this particular function. But here I just want to have an integrated testing, okay? Yeah. So here we can say this, and we have serve here. And we're gonna say user equals to, we're gonna create it. So serve.model.create super user. And we're gonna use a faker to give in some default values. So we're gonna say username equals to fake dot username. The email would be equals to fake dot email. What else do we need? So take a look at this. You can see we have username, email, first name, date of birth, password. So we're gonna do that, and here it's gonna be first name, fake, first name, last date of birth, equals to fake dates of birth, Let's see. What else do we need? I think that's all we need, right? So next thing we need is the password. Okay, so let's go ahead and put the password. Will be fake.password. Okay. With that created, we want to check a few things. So we're gonna check the instance. We make sure that the user that is created here is an instance of the user planner. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is that we want to make sure that we check that it is a super user, because remember we're using the create super user function. So we set to make sure that the user dot is super user equals to true. And we also check the staff, of course. User is staff equals to true. Okay, this is what make up the super user. So we go ahead and run the test again, and let's see. Okay, so we say it says user planner has no attributes, create super user. Okay, this is because we should get it from the objects. Okay, should get it from the objects of that particular model. So let's go ahead and run it again. Okay, so we can see everything works as expected. All right, so here we are testing the project model. Okay, and I have it already, so I'm gonna just walk you through what I did. All right, so first of all, we make sure we import everything, especially the link model, the user planner model, because the project depends on these two. Okay, we also import the abstract description model. Okay, because if we take a look at the project model, we can see it inherits both the abstract model and the abstract description model. Okay, so here the first thing we want to test is the model instance. So it inherits the base model test and set up the model. And here we want to make sure that we create the phone number that is found in the foreign key, because we can see here we have the user, which is a foreign key of the user planner. So for us to create the phone number in that foreign key, we need to use this format. So the user, which is the field, and we use double underscore to get to the foreign key, and we specify the phone number, and we set it with the faker. Okay, and here we added to the common attribute that we have already. We add these attributes as well. So we have the user, start date, end date, link, description, and short description. So we can see here we have user, start date, end date, links, and description and short description comes from the abstract description model. Okay, all right, so here we test the short description method, and here we test the string method. And here we want to make sure that this project model inherits the abstract description. Okay, and moving further, we test the meta property and constraint. So here we want to test the unique together constraint. So we can see here the unique together constraint. This is it here under the class meta. And we're going to test also the ordering and also this constraint. So if we come back to this, we can see this is the ordering we are testing, and these are the constraint we are testing. So here the first constraint, make sure that the end date and start date can be none. So we get the instance and we modify the values and we save it again. All right, so here we make sure that if the start date is none and the end date is not none, then it has to fail. So yeah, this is why we have this marker here to indicate that this particular test needs to fail. So here we modify the values and we save it again. We do the same thing here. Here we test to make sure that if the start date is if the start date is set, the end date can be none and everything will be fine. And here we want to make sure that the start date and the end date can be set. Okay, and here we want to make sure that the start date should be greater than should be lesser than the end date. So that's why it's indicated here with this marker. So once we are done with that, we can go ahead and start testing the individual fields. So we do the same thing here. We inherit the base model field and we set the model to project, and we start here we start testing the individual field. So here we are testing the user field. Here we make sure that the user, okay, the user field is a foreign key, okay, and its related model is the user planner. Okay, so here we test to make sure we have the correct related model, okay, for that particular field, which is the user field. And we can see the field type here is a foreign key. All right, and the onDelete, we make sure the onDelete is set to model cascade. And here we test the start date, here end date, here we test the link. And the link is a many-to-many relationship. We make sure also it has the correct related model, which is the link. And here we test the related name. So if we come down here, and here at the level of the many-to-many relationship, we can see we have this related name here. So we want to test to make sure the related name is set to projects. So if we come back, we can see the test handle it at this level. And that's it for this video. Unfortunately, I cannot test all the models in this video, but check the project repository for all the model tests. In our next video, we'll look at how we can insert fake data into our Django application for development purposes. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment to support the channel. Code with Eno. See you in the next video.